setup we've got here, Gaurav, is very indicative and very symbolic of the message of India-Russia friendship.
This is a friendship that stood the test of time. It's a time-tested relationship that's actually held through thick and thin. Two partners who've stood with each other, and this is a relationship that's actually undergoing a transformation right now, as that India Today world exclusive interview will actually indicate.
You know, those are almost literally the words that Vladimir Putin has mentioned to describe the India-Russia story right now and what the relationship looks like going forward. So what we're going to do over the next 1 hour here on the special broadcast, Gaurav and I will be joined by my colleagues on ground and here in the studio as well, as we get you a sneak peek of what to expect in that big world exclusive. It's already got the world talking. I don't know about you, Gaurav, but I've been getting endless messages, calls, asking me when the interview will be out, asking me for particular points about what really Vladimir Putin has said.
Because this is one person, President Putin, one of the most powerful men in the world. There's a war that's on between Russia and Ukraine that Russia calls the special operations. President Trump sent a special team. In fact, when India Today cameras were there in one room of the Kremlin, in the other room of the Kremlin, you had Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in talks with President Putin, trying to find a solution. And the first interview President Putin has given is to India Today.
So he's actually spoken about that. I don't want to give away too much because I've heard the nearly 100-minute long interview. But it's actually spoken about what you're referring to, Gaurav, about Donald Trump, about the Ukraine war, about ties with India. There's so much about oil, nuclear ties, so much more that, you know, it's a long, long list. Every aspect, every global issue that you can think of, we've got it covered in that interview. So without any further ado, let's put out pictures of what really our interview looks like. Because in less than 4 hours from now, that countdown on your screens, in less than 4 hours from now, we will have the full interview, mind you. And this is the interesting aspect, Gaurav, is that, you know, when this interview was planned, lined up, we were planning this for months together. It was a slotted 60-minute interview. From that to becoming a 100-minute long interview speaks volumes of how Vladimir Putin has chosen to take every question, said, take your time, ask me anything you want, completely unscripted, free-flowing conversation that's gone out to 100 minutes.
So the West has tried to villainize Vladimir Putin. India Today will show you a different side of Vladimir Putin, all facts, all questions asked. But then there is a Russian perspective, and in this Western agenda-driven news, you get facts in public domain. There may be some who'll try and say that the news has to be done from this perspective. As far as India Today is concerned, we give you news the way it is, free-flowing and facts first to keep India first.
Very true. And the message of India first for Putin, Russia first, it ultimately translates to the same thing, because you see both countries have such a great relationship. That's what Putin also constantly refers to in that interview. But enough from us. I want to bring in, I know we've transported ourselves via this set to Moscow because we're here in the national capital. Let me bring in Geeta Mohan. She's joining us from Moscow. She's had that conversation with the Russian president. So who better than Geeta to tell you about what to expect in this interview? Geeta, first of all, a huge congratulations on being a part of such a historic agenda-setting interview, one that's grabbing international headlines right now. But I want to understand from you, and I think this is a question most people have, and I'm sure you've got it a lot. What was it like? What was the experience like of interviewing the president of Russia, Geeta?
Well, it's one of the rarest moments in a journalist's career when you get to interview a world leader. And Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, is one such instance, an experience which is going to be unforgettable. The crew, our entire leadership, everyone was here. But going into the Kremlin, walking into those corridors and going into the Ekaterina Hall, which is the Catherine Hall, historic, that's where all the important meetings, the decorations, all those occasions are celebrated in that very room. So it was amazing, just one, to be there. Secondly, waiting for President Putin then to come for the interview and then interviewing the man himself. And I say this because it was a no-holds-barred interview. We asked him any and every question that we wanted to. We had our own counter questions to every response of his. And he very freely spoke about everything, whether it is bilateral, India-Russia relations, India and the region, Russia and the region, and Russia and the world. So we did not confine ourselves just to one subject, that is his very, very important visit to India, which comes after 5 years, but also more importantly, the fact that where is Russia today? It's a changed world order in many ways than one. Russia certainly is in the middle of a very intense war, not just with Ukraine, but also with how Europe, the West and America is looking at this entire region. So in all of that, what we are looking at and what we understand is that this is a very confident Putin. Despite all the gains or losses, a very confident Putin who thinks that he has sent out a very strong message. And at this point in time, with the change in administration in US, the fact that they're engaging the administration over here in itself speaks volumes. That's exactly why it was a historic moment, because the day before, when we were at the Kremlin, in that very same hall, in the rooms, just a few rooms away, there was a historic moment unfolding right in front of us. That is the meeting of Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff with President Putin. And in that meeting, there was a lot of forward movement on how America is looking at an engaged, negotiated settlement between Russia and Ukraine. We'll break that down for you, because that's a very important breaking news. But it was, in all, an amazing experience. Anjana and I were prepared, but also the fact that it went very, very smoothly when it comes to interviewing a leader, and he was absolutely okay with taking any question. The interview had to last only about an hour, but it went on for more than 90 minutes. That speaks of how comfortable the entire atmosphere for an interview, an intense interview at that, was.
No, you're right. It was intense, because I was watching it and thinking that, look, this particular issue, for example, there were some of those topics that were brought up that I was wondering how Putin would address, but he took them all head on. But Gaurav, to you, you've tracked the India-Russia story for so many decades now. What is the one aspect that you're looking forward to hear about from Mr. Putin?
How is this relationship being taken forward? How does this move beyond just being defense and strategic relationship? How does this go into the economic aspect? Because economy drives any relationship to the next level. Russia-India relationship, it stood the test of time, whether it's before the 1971 war, the agreement between the two countries, the 1999 war in Kargil, and how Russia was quick to rush military hardware to India, and subsequently the nuclear submarine that we have, the kind of technology and knowledge that India gained from Russia. So over the years, military cooperation is very strong. How do you move beyond that military cooperation, beyond energy, to trade, for example, people-to-people ties? How do you take that forward? Once that happens, this relationship will only rise and soar after that.
No, very true. And I can promise you, Gaurav, that when you tune in, and so do our viewers at 9 p.m., he actually has answers to that, about what the future of India-Russia ties look like. There's such a deep sense of trust that you also get when you listen to Mr. Putin speak about India, or speak about Prime Minister Modi, for that matter.
That's very interesting that you mentioned his camaraderie, his camaraderie with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Yeah. So President Putin has been at the helm of affairs for about 25 years. If you remember that picture that you and I were talking about in 2001, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. That's the time. And we have that picture. Also, yeah. That's the time, Narendra Modi wasn't even Chief Minister of Gujarat till then. He became Chief Minister of Gujarat in end 2001, early 2002. And that's when something started changing. But from that to now, that Narendra Modi has been Prime Minister of India for 11 years, they've met perhaps 19 times plus. It just goes on to show how close the bond between the two of them are. I was there in Tianjin. We were reporting from Tianjin, and that's when President Putin waited for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They traveled in the same car. There's a conversation around that, and that also shows how close the two are to each other. The Russia first and India first, how they partner together, is something which is very important, Akshita.
Those are the pictures right there that Gaurav was referring to, the 2001 pictures. You have Putin, you have Vajpayee, and you have Narendra Modi right behind. I will also, of course, show you exactly that moment where you can see Narendra Modi right behind them. So you essentially have seen Putin ensure that, the Russia-India story goes through despite different regimes and through different courses of really our political journey, India's political journey, our growth story. Putin has seen all of that. So as we continue getting all of those images, the mention that Gaurav also made about what Putin had to say on several of these aspects, we'll talk about that as well. Let's bring you at this point a sense of what to expect in this interview. Geeta Mohan, Anjana Om Kashyap were there. They spoke to Vladimir Putin. Right after that, remember that India Today Group's editor-in-chief, Arun Puri, executive editor-in-chief Kalipuri, were also there. They were there in Moscow. They had a chance to meet with Mr. Putin. I know all of you are waiting for that interview. So here's that conversation where they actually talk about what to expect and the body language of Mr. Putin, what really stood out about the interview.
The leadership of India today, who were here, who traveled all the way to Moscow. We are here at the Ekaterina Hall. This is a historic hall. President Putin holds his National Council meetings here. He decorates people here. And now the decorated members of India Today Group, the Group, are here. How did it feel, Kali?
We're on such an adrenaline high, watching the two of you on air in a monitor. It was just amazing. You were the two women who interviewed him for the first time. He hasn't been interviewed by two women anchors, so that's a first. And I thought that the interview was very global in its perspective. We didn't just stick to our own problem of India and relations between India and Russia, but you widened the perspective on what President Putin brings to the global stage. And I think that really was a coming out ball, let's say, for an Indian media house to be talking about global issues, because why should we be left behind? We are on the global stage to be taking part and be invited to this high table. And I think the two of you really did a fantastic job.
एग्जीक्यूटिव एडिटर इन चीफ कलीपुरी ये मानती हैं कि ये बहुत बड़ी कामयाबी है हमारे लिए कि हमने हर सवाल, हर मुद्दे पर भारत नहीं, रूस, यूक्रेन नहीं, पूरे विश्व में हर देश पर बातचीत की. अब हमारे साथ हमारे एडिटर इन चीफ अरुण पुरी हैं. आपके लिए क्या हाईलाइट था?
Firstly, it was a very important moment for the India Today Group to get this interview. So I'm really proud of both of you who did the interview and the rest of the team who put it all together. I think it was a wonderful way, the way the interview was conducted. Also, for me, seeing Putin, meeting him personally, etc., he's been painted as a kind of villain of the world order in many ways, right? And the changing world order. And he came across as somebody who answered every one of your questions. He didn't duck anything, right? And that was an experience to see that here is a man who was painted in a certain way, but came across completely differently as somebody who would be ready to, has his own view of history, his own view of looking at the world, but he was very clear on what he wanted to say. And that was a great impression.
A moment of pride, Kali? Because
I think one of the things was, around any world leader, the team is very strict about protocol and about the amount of time you can spend with the leader. And they were very clear that you have 60 minutes. But because the president was enjoying the conversation so much, he was smiling and he was so charmed and he liked the questions, the interview ran for 100 minutes. And even afterwards, he was very open to engage with us in an informal conversation. I think that was a testament to the interviewing ability of the two of you and, of course, the rest of the team and the entire research that worked behind. I want to add to this that we were selected amongst all of the Indian channels by the Russian press team. And they did that because of the impact that the India Today Group brings for any big interview. And I'm very proud of that. And I think they felt happy that they had made the right choice. And that, again, is a good sort of way to end the year for us, right? We're like in December now, 20 days to end the year.
Mr. Puri, I think the most interesting part for me was to see him, see his sense of humor. That came as a surprise because everybody has always portrayed him as this villain of the West that you've...
Or a very
pointing out.
serious man.
You asked him a very interesting question as well.
Yes, I asked him, I had the opportunity to talk to him off camera, where I asked him, okay, you've been a top leader for 25 years, over 25 years of Russia, and do you have any regrets? Would you do something any different? He kind of thought and, kind of and awed, and he said, well, I think he's a man who doesn't want to admit mistakes. So he said, I never look back. So that was the end of that.
Just talking about sustainability and trade, there is immense pressure on India and on Russia when it comes to oil. India has suffered in terms of the kind of pressure that we're seeing from West. How can both countries handle this Western pressure and sanctions?
So we're counting down to the visit also by Russian President Vladimir Putin. That he's going to touch down in India, in New Delhi, in just about an hour from now at 6:30. But meanwhile, the Russian Defense Minister is already here. Andrew Belousov is here, has met with Defense Minister Rajnath Singh. Let's get you details of what's really happening in that key defense meeting. One of the biggest takeaways from Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India is going to be the defense deals that are inked. And to that, this particular meeting that's happening between Rajnath Singh and his Russian counterpart is extremely crucial. Gaurav, what's the most exciting aspect really of the defense deals that could be signed?
So there are two aspects of this. One, defense deals that have already been signed and they need to be fulfilled. For example, the S-400 system, India has signed a deal for 5 of them, 3 have arrived, the remaining 2 haven't. So there's a conversation, how quickly will the remaining 2 arrive? And then the original plan to have 10 regiments of the S-400s. We've got 5, let's say 3 already, 2 plus 2 plus another 5. So that's the second part of the thing. And remember, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke of the Sudarshan Chakra, the Kavach for India, that shield for India. Now, that is something that India and Russia are in conversation with, and I'm told at a very advanced stage for the S-500 system. The moment you have the S-500 system, it's not just an air defense shield, it will ensure that the entire envelope, as far as India's adversaries are concerned, they cannot even take off because their aircraft will be shot down. Their missiles, including hypersonic missiles, can be shot down. So that's the level of cooperation. Plus 2 squadrons of the Su-57s as an interim. That's also one of the aspects that's being talked about. What kind of technology transfer is something, again, that the two countries, like President Putin said, close partners, high level of trust, they'll be taking this relationship forward.
I'm just going to refer to the message that's coming from the Russian Defense Minister. Andrew Belousov is currently in India, and he says, I quote here, very fittingly, he says, our bilateral relations have a strategic character and the partnership with India is a key factor for the balance in the South Asian region and global security in general. That aspect I find very, very important, Gaurav, when he refers to balance in the South Asia region and speaks of global security.
So, by and large, when you look at it, India and Russia also have inked, and the Russian parliament, the Duma, has ratified the Relos logistics agreement, and that would indicate if Russian aircraft and ships are in this region, they can refuel, their logistics are taken care of. When our aircraft and ships are in their region, in the Arctic region especially, something that India is keen to explore further, and that will be the shortest trade route. So that's where India also wants to play a bigger role. That cooperation, strategic cooperation, defense cooperation, nuclear energy cooperation in general. There are so many dimensions. If I may, I don't want to just quote what President Putin said, and you and I have had the privilege of listening to that interview. The cooperation is immense, from a Kalashnikov to the T-90s, to the S-400s, to the Su-57s. Sky is the limit, or perhaps space is the limit. Outer space is the limit. So that's the level of cooperation between India and Russia. And the aim is a signal that's going out to the West. They may threaten us with sanctions, but this is the relationship that cannot be checked.
And that's a very important and a very well put line there, Gaurav, that sky is not the limit, outer space is. And that tells you really how our ties transcend beyond just one sector. It goes into so many sectors. Let me bring in Shivani Sharma as well as Pranay Upadhyay. Shivani Sharma is tracking this particular meeting that's currently underway. Pranay Upadhyay is joining us live from outside the Prime Minister's residence, because that's where President Putin will be arriving later tonight. Shivani, to you first, all the big takeaways, the big headlines that are expected from this meeting between Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and his Russian counterpart. It sets the stage perfectly for President Putin's touchdown in India.
Certainly, you see President Putin's meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and as a prelude, we are seeing the meetings between the Defense Minister of India and Russia, and defense happens to be one of the very important part of India-Russia relationship, not only in terms of procurements, but also the kind of support, the interoperability, the exercises in which India and Russia have been participating, the kind of support system and solidarity Russia and India exchange with each other. And very recently, Akshata Rail loss has been in news. The reciprocal exchange of logistics support, that is also a very important point here, that enables both the countries to deploy their troops as and when required in each other's nation and on the mission. So all this is very important to understand, as Gaurav was also pointing out, that procurement of additional S-400 remains on the cards when both the ministers are meeting, and the expediting the 2 regiments of S-400 which we are waiting for, replenishing the missile systems of S-400 that were used during Operation Sindoor. India is already working on that, and India is working to strengthen its air shield, the Sudarshan Chakra. So for that, we may procure more S-400. S-500 has already been offered by Russia to India. Su-57 has been offered. We've seen how the Russian delegates have been trying to pitch in Su-57, though India is working on its own 5th generation aircraft, AMCA. So certainly there will be a number of issues, deals that will be discussed here. And Indian and Russian counterpart, when they will be exchanging these views, we also expect a statement out of this meeting, and that will be important to see. And the deals that will follow after this meeting will also set the agenda to strengthen the ties between India and Russia militarily.
Very true. I'll bring in Pranay Upadhyay for the overall picture here. Pranay, you were, of course, tracking very closely the visit by Putin, but beyond that, you also watched the entire full 100-minute interview of Vladimir Putin. There's so much to watch out for. And Pranay, if you're with us, as you stand by for the first images of Putin once he touches down in Delhi, what to you is going to be the biggest headline that will emerge from Putin's visit? Okay, don't think Pranay is with us. We'll reconnect with him. But in the meanwhile, I know you're all counting down to the interview when it airs at 9 p.m. tonight. We've also, on popular demand, pulled out a few of those nuggets of what really to expect in this interview with Vladimir Putin. Take a look at some of those excerpts where the Russian president speaks about his connect with Prime Minister Modi, where the Russian president speaks about why India is such a crucial ally for Russia.
Very interesting question, because when you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a car, and we're showing it to our viewers right now. You were traveling in a car with him. Was it pre-planned, or how did it go about? How did it happen? And what did you discuss in the car?
Вы знаете, обсуждали текущие вопросы.
We were talking about just the current agenda. It was not pre-planned.
Вышли на улицу,
We just went outside into the street, and my car was there, and I suggested that we should get together, just, as a sign of friendship, of comradeship. There's nothing, no complicated orchestration, just as friends. We got together in one car and we spoke. Along the road, there was always something to talk about. And, we had a conversation. We even sat in the car for quite some time. And then I said, yes, we should go because they're waiting for us. But there's nothing special about that. It just testifies to the fact that there's a lot we have to talk about. And these topics are of importance to us.
Right. President Sir, the fact that you're going to go to India, you just said that both leaders are going to cement the guarantees that you give each other. What are the kind of announcements that we can expect? We've heard about technology transfer, we've heard about trade enhancement. What are the solid announcements during this visit? And I ask you this is because the world, and you know who I mean, would be watching.
Ну, то, что мир будет следить за
Well, the
нашим
world
развитием здесь.
is going to be watching. I don't think there's anything special about that. Because, India is a great country, 1.5 billion people. It's a developing economy where the rate of growth is 7.7%. This is the first result in the world. Prime Minister Modi has managed to achieve that, and this says a lot. The Indian nation can take pride in. There's all to be proud of. Of course, there are always detractors, critics who believe that this can be done better, but that said, the result is evident. We've got a whole plan for cooperation which covers the most important spheres and fields. The most important ones are certainly oriented towards the future, and one of them is high technology. India and Russia are working together in outer space exploration, in energy, nuclear energy in particular, which is well known because, one of the leaders in that field, also shipbuilding, aircraft building. We have very many interesting directions which are oriented towards the future. Or let's take artificial intelligence. We'll probably talk about that later. But this is one of the key technologies of the future which is reshaping the world as we speak, because it manages to multiply things many-fold, but at the same time it creates certain challenges to be addressed, and we'll talk about all of that. And as Prime Minister Modi thinks and what I think, well, we'll choose what is of the greatest significance at this stage, and we'll help with that.
Agreement, sir?
Конечно,
Well, of course, but we should probably not announce them right now because, all of that is going to be announced in the course of the visit. We will present that to the public. And then the colleagues will present all of these agreements to us, and we'll have to give our final approval to these agreements.
When you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a car, and we're showing it to our viewers right now. You were traveling in a car with him. What did you discuss in the car?
So what we just showed you is a small glimpse of what to expect at 9 p.m. tonight, when we will be playing that 100-minute long, completely uncensored, uncut interview for you, where you'll hear Vladimir Putin's thoughts on so many issues, on every possible global issue. He's spoken his mind out like never before. Joining me here in the studio, Gaurav, of course, has been taking you through all of the big headlines that are expected from this interview. Preeti Chaudhary is also with us. Preeti, good evening. I'm sure you've also been seeing all of the buzz, getting endless calls and texts, I'm sure, asking what has Putin spoken about, when is the interview going to be coming out, what is going to be the big headline?
Well, you're bang on, Akshata. And first up, I think as the India Today group, as a group, we take immense pride that, we are the ones who've gotten, this interview first. One thing is very clear. This is not just in the context of India or South Pacific. This is in context, it has deep global meaning that we have got this interview. What Putin says today, and we air it at 9 p.m., will not just be quoted back home here or in Russia or, say, the Southeast Asia. It will be quoted internationally on what he says about Trump, what he speaks about the tariffs, what he has to say about oil, what he has to say about defense cooperation where India is concerned. This is truly a global interview. So just by the, for just a minute, I just want to step back and pat ourselves at the back that it's a job.
Scale of it.
Just the sheer scale of it. It's a job well done, and you're bang on. My phone has been ringing. I don't know about yours, Akshata, because I remember Akshata has been in the PCR all through the course of the night, trying to, put it all together. And what I think most of us are completely aghast, and pleasantly so, is that nothing was scripted. And everybody says, that's what everyone says, but you'll have to really, wait and listen in at 9 p.m. today to that 90-minute interview to get an understanding of why we are saying what we are saying, why it wasn't completely unscripted. That is the basic tenet of it. But, personally, Akshata and Gaurav, I don't know about you guys, but what I really feel is there's so much, if there is a classic terminology called palace intrigue, if it is attached to a particular leader, I would think it has to be President Putin, because there is so, the mysterious aura around the man is so intense that there are multiple interpretations of it in the geopolitical context that we stand in today. And I think that in itself is huge that we have him. He's taken every question. So a bit of that palace intrigue that we speak of would be neutralized today. To what degree, you'll only know at 9 p.m., Akshata, won't they?
You were highlighting how I was there listening to the whole interview. We were in office till about 5 this morning, kind of going through everything. And when you've listed out all of the issues, Preeti, what I'm doing in my head is constantly going, tick, tick, tick on each of those issues, because each of those issues Putin has actually spoken on in their interview. Not one of those issues have actually been missed. He's spoken on every single one of those. On who Putin is, the person that he is, how has he been one of the longest serving world leaders, etc. Anjana and Geeta very smartly also asked him about that, tried to understand the man that he is, the person that he is. He's kind of given us a glimpse of that too. When I went into the production control room and we were setting up for this interview there, I think we all had a certain image of Vladimir Putin, of someone who's a tough man, walks the talk, of course, but also you always assume a man of very few words, someone who's very, rigid, who's very in control. And you got that sense the moment he entered the room that he was in control. But also what I think most of us were taken aback by was how candid he chose to be. How candid he chose to be on so many issues. Very often he had a smile on his face. He had a great sense of humor, by the way, in the interview, which you'll see at 9 p.m. So there are so many highlights that I can't stop talking about it, honestly.
You know what, Gaurav, I think, if I may just come in, what I thought was, it's a little bit of an off the interview on the sidelines where we had, our editor-in-chief and vice chairperson, Kalipuri, where we had that interaction with her in terms of Anjana and Geeta, who conducted that interview. And there was this one question, because I was just thinking, because I'm doing a bit of political interviews nowadays, nothing compared to what we've landed here, but, so I think, what is that one question I'd really like to ask somebody who's been 25 years in office, right?
The regrets
and the regrets one. Yeah. Do you have any regrets? And that, I think, with what Arun Puri said, we call him AP back here at the India Today headquarters. What he said, what he told him was classic, because that, I think, is classic Putin of what you think he is. Yeah. And no, he doesn't look back, he only looks ahead. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. But, in terms of the big ticket, statements, the big ticket comments, especially at a time where, Gaurav speaks so much of a multipolarity in this, time right now, where the geopolitics of the world is concerned. I am so looking forward to this interview.
Gaurav, what do you think? Do you think, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people looking into body language, looking into how Putin is taking several of these questions, because everyone wants to understand who Putin is as a person as well. There will be so many questions about what does he do? How has he been in the command for so long? What's his aura like? There'll be so many of those questions as well.
Indeed, and he is somebody who comes across as someone who's very, very strong. He's ex-KGB, he's been a colonel in the KGB, served undercover, was posted in East Germany, then East Germany, then, of course, switched over, became a political leader, and the way he's been president of Russia, and the way he handles every issue. If you notice one thing about him, he's very calm. He listens to you, he smiles, he responds at his pace. So there's a conflict that's on. Remember, initially people said Russia will be broken, Russia will be shattered, but the way he executed this operation and he continues to pursue it, he's somebody who knew what he wanted to do, the kind of pressure he wanted to mount on the Ukrainian regime, the kind of pressure he's now mounting on Europe when he has to give out a threat, when he has to carry out his nuclear, exercises. He knows what he wants to do, and perhaps that's the reason why America is also reaching out to him. And right now, Europe is palpitating. Europe is in panic, because look at what's happening in Moscow. One is this India Today interview. One is the Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Moscow. And the other is the American special team in Moscow. So you have three very powerful entities in dialogue, and there's no Europe there on the table. So if you're not on the table, you're on the menu, and that's exactly what appears to be happening with them.
Okay, so we've got a countdown on our screens right now of when the Vladimir Putin World Exclusive airs. It's at 9 p.m. tonight, but we're also tracking very closely Putin's touchdown in India. Less than an hour to go for that. At 6:30 p.m. is when the Russian president will be touching down in the national capital. We are hearing that External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will be visiting, will be personally welcoming the Russian president when he touches down in the national capital. And very clearly, of course, we'll be getting you those live images. Who better to watch than India Today? We've got you the man himself, Vladimir Putin. He's spoken and he's chosen the India Today group to speak out for the very first time. This is his first interview in decades. The first time he's chosen to speak to an Indian television network as well. Now, what we're hearing from our sources, and I'll bring in Pranay Upadhyay for more details on really who's traveling with President Putin, what's on the agenda tonight. Pranay is joining us live from outside 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. Pranay, over to you. Get us those details. Less than an hour to go.
Absolutely, an hour to go, and President Vladimir Putin's aircraft, his special flight from the Russian security squadron, is the most tracked flight on open source. People are tracking. He has already entered the Indian airspace and he's about to touch down in New Delhi in just an hour's time. And he'll straight away come to this place, 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi will not only receive him, but he will also host a private dinner for his friend, his ally, his comrade, and there will be a bonhomie. We will again see the pictures of handshakes and hugs between Prime Minister Modi and President Vladimir Putin, and how fondly he remembered every meeting with Prime Minister Modi. You heard him, and people will get to hear President Putin's views about Prime Minister Modi and his meetings, about his encounter and about his his discussion with Prime Minister Modi in that car meeting in Tianjin of China. So clearly, there is a bonding, there is a bonhomie between these two leaders, but world will again see that bonhomie. And you asked about the entourage. The meeting has already started with the commencement of or with the delegation level talks between Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh and his defense counterpart. His counterpart in the Russian Defense Ministry, Andrei Belousov, is going on right now in South Block, and this is the beginning of the India-Russia strategic partnership summit, or the 23rd India-Russia annual summit, and that is also part of it. Besides that, around 7 ministers are accompanying. Besides that, a huge business delegation is also accompanying President Vladimir Putin.
Okay, big breaking news that's coming in. Pranay, I just request you to stay with me. The big update that's coming in is that Prime Minister Modi reportedly will be personally receiving President Putin at the airport. This is at the Palam airport as expected. You know, we've been speaking about the India-Russia dosti, the Modi-Putin dosti. So not surprising, Gaurav, that in all likelihood, Prime Minister Modi will be at the airport to personally receive President Putin.
This shows the close bond between India and Russia as two countries, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President Vladimir Putin as two individuals. Each time they meet, and we've covered their summits both in New Delhi and in Moscow, and of course recently in Tianjin. Their bond has to be seen to be believed. Remember that conversation where Prime Minister Narendra Modi had travelled to Russia? I'd covered that visit. They were supposed to meet for 2 hours. That meeting lasted over 5 hours. And it was just Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian president and the interpreter. The second time, when the interpreter was translating what the Prime Minister was saying, the Russian president said, "I don't need a translator. We are so close. Our hearts understand each other's language." So that's the kind of bond India and Russia and Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian president share. Remember, he's also said, look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India has reason to be proud of him because his entire work is to keep India first. And that speaks volumes when a tall world leader speaks about your Prime Minister understanding the way he functions for the country.
But it's also, I think, telling, Preeti, about how, you know, for both India and Russia, this is a very crucial strategic relationship. And that's why you see these kind of steps being taken by both leaders.
Akshata, one thing I would reckon that every Indian understands is that Russia has stood by India through the course of time.
Very true.
In the historical context, Russia has always got India's back, if you have to use Gen Z language, in it.
That's
and,
not Gen Z
in that
language,
context, sorry?
That's not Gen Z
Oh
language.
Lord, then maybe, like I said, then maybe we are getting too old for any of this. But yeah, so India, Russia has always stood by India in the historical context, but what has endured that friendship with Russia, and I would think from India's side, is that we have constantly evolved. We've kept up with the contemporary times. We have evolved our friendship with Russia, keeping in mind, the geopolitics of that point of time, and that is what has led our friendship to endure. And it's happened over decades now. So even now, it's not, that easy in terms for India. It is a tightrope diplomatic walk to host somebody like President Putin, when just about a week or next month we're going to have a delegation from America where tariffs are concerned. We're facing 50%. It could go down to 15%. So there is a wager in all of this, a diplomatic wager. And it is, like I said, a tightrope walk for India. But one thing is very clear. What these visuals define today with the visit and will continue to define for the next 30 hours when President Putin is in India is how the legacy of that friendship has endured. It's multifaceted, it's changed with the times, especially in the current context, and both countries have adjusted and evolved to keep that friendship going. And I think this would also be a test of that, on what that joint declaration is tomorrow, Gaurav.
Oh, indeed. In fact,
it all come down to that.
This is a relationship where both people to people, you love each other. Indians really are very close to Russians. Russians, they love Indians.
They love Bollywood music,
They love, from Raj Kapoor, Mera Juta Hai Japani, Avara Hu. Each time you go, oh, Jimmy, 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 Aja, Aja, Aja. That's something you hear on the streets of Russia. They love Indian music. They love Indian films. They love Indian people, and vice versa. Strategic ties. Now, does it escalate to the economic ties? Because India stands with Prime Minister Narendra Modi going to the airport, the kind of red carpet that's being laid out for President Putin, the message to America is very clear. This relationship has withstood the test of time, and it's not at the cost of Americans, and Americans will not dictate how we pursue our friendship with Russia.
It's a calculated risk,
it's very clear.
because
there's
the messaging,
no risk. The messaging is very clear. It's not one at the cost of the other.
No, I agree with you, till a point, but it is also messaging in terms of there will be consequences and ramifications of this visit, which we have diplomatically calculated.
And so that decided that's okay. We're okay with that.
Yeah, this risk has been assessed, but a lot will define on how comfortable we make both sides. How much we walk in terms of Russia tomorrow when the joint declaration is there. Because like I said, in a month you have a delegation on trade coming in. Will that 50% be reduced to 15%? That will also tantamount to how much oil we end up buying. So
it's not just oil. Now you're going way beyond oil. You're talking about nuclear
defense.
energy.
I agree with all of that. But it's a tightrope walk, Gaurav. The consequences will be felt where our relationship with America is concerned. So therefore the tightrope
So that's for America to think.
That's
for
also
America
for us to think, because we've got a good relationship.
So I think the strategy very
We've
clearly
actually
for
thought
us.
this through. India's actually thought this through. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been rolling out the red carpet in the manner in which you're rolling out the red carpet.
We managed to.
No,
we have
did
managed.
not come for G20.
No, I'm saying
he did not come for G20.
We have always. I'm talking about the historical context
I'm talking
of it.
about current
We
G20.
have always managed to do it, which is walk that tightrope diplomatic walk, both with America and Russia, and we'll know tomorrow. And I think what is poised is correct. In that manner, I do agree with you. What we are poised for is great leaps, hopefully, in our friendship and economic solidarity where Russia is concerned, and we keep it going with the US.
Okay, I'm just going to highlight here that President Putin, in our exclusive, has spoken about Trump, has spoken of tariff, and has spoken about how America has attempted to punish India for purchasing oil. He's spoken on all of those fronts as well. Since Preeti and Gaurav have brought those up, I'll plug that in quickly. Let me bring in Amit Bharadwaj. He's joining us live from right outside the Palam airport. That's where President Putin will be landing in less than an hour from now. Amit, we understand that looking at the kind of security deployment there, Prime Minister Modi could be reaching there in a few moments from now.
Absolutely right, Akshata. We are standing right in front of the Palam technical area. The entire area has been cordoned off right now, and you would see the policemen standing out here, and they're literally standing here in order for us to leave this space, vacate this space, because PM protocol has been put into place, and which is very much the indication that Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself could be coming to the Palam technical airport. to receive President Putin. And this also reflects the kind of strong friendship and bond that they share. You know, when you had, as you were, all of you were also discussing that meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin back in China, and it also sends across a message, the kind of bond they share, the friendship they share, and what could be stored in the card. So on the basis that Prime Minister's protocol, security protocol, has been put into place at Palam Technical Airport area itself, we can certainly say there's a high possibility that PM Modi would be coming himself here in order to receive President Putin. Back to you.
So we'll be standing by for those images from your cameras, Amit, in just about 45 minutes from now. 6:30 is when Putin will be touching down in the national capital. And from what we're hearing from our sources, Prime Minister Modi will personally greet him at the airport. And then it's over to his residence, 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, for a dinner. What's on the menu? We'll hopefully know in the coming hours. What's the delicacy in Russia?
So
both of you have been.
Snails.
Yeah,
Snails? Yes, in butter.
So lot of food. No, Russia is very diverse.
Like, yeah.
Very diverse. It's such a huge country. Food in the eastern part is very different from the western part. Moscow is very different. St. Petersburg is altogether different. So lots of great food. A lot of bread, of course. A lot of bread. Lots of cakes, pastries.
It's traditional.
Cheese,
a lot of meats.
Lot of meats.
You know, because I remember it was so strange. I have such a strange memory of Russia because I got married during the times of COVID. And at that point,
you went to Russia.
And that because so that's the friendship between India and Russia, because they were the only ones who were giving visas to India during the times of COVID. So I actually went to Russia, and food is, in terms of, there's a fair amount of very heavy, understandably, on meats. But where St. Petersburg meets Europe, then you get the whole European experience. You know, the culinary experience in Russia comes into St. Petersburg, and that's the advent in terms of where.
And that's where Putin's from.
Or you go to Kazan, for example. The food is completely different. Where we were covering the BRICS summit, different parts of Russia, but great food and greater hospitality.
Clearly,
the moment they learn you're an Indian, the food is great. Of course, at the Prime Minister's residence, it's all vegetarian. A lot of millets thrown in. A lot of Indian food comes in. President Putin usually does try something that's Indian.
That's where the palace intrigue comes into question. I really want to know, because what you've heard.
How open is he to those things?
Will he be open to trying the food which is being served, or is it going to be, like he'll have dinner with the Prime Minister, but there'll be food which has been bought in, for him specifically?
I'm sure they'll also cater to his tastes, inevitably.
And that's where the close trust and bond between India and Russia and Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
I want to know about that, because like I said, this is where that entire palace intrigue.
Well, fine. We'll get you a world exclusive Putin interview, but we'll also get you what's on the menu here on India Today. So we'll get you that exclusive as well lined up. But let's bring this back to also what to expect at 9 p.m. when that Vladimir Putin 100-minute interview airs here on India Today. We've been giving you glimpses of what to expect. And one of the aspects that we've been speaking about here is how this isn't an interview just focused on India-Russia. Vladimir Putin took questions on every possible issue, including the Ukraine war. What did he have to say about it? What's the end game for the Russian president? Here's an excerpt.
What is the end game for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine?
Так я же сказал.
Well, I've just said it.
Мы признали вот эти.
We have recognized. Listen.
Мы 8 лет не признавали.
For 8 years, we did not recognize the self-declared republics. For 8 years, they have declared the independence.
А мы старались наладить
And we were trying
с остальной частью
to build relations between the rest of Ukraine
Потом,
and
когда
these
поняли, что это
republics.
невозможно,
When
что
we
их просто уничтожают,
understood that it's impossible, that they're simply being destroyed, we were forced to recognize them, and not simply recognize them as a partial territory, but within the administrative borders when they existed back in the Soviet times.
а потом во времена независимой
And later, during the times of the independent Ukraine, after it gained independence,
административных границ.
in the
И мы сразу Украине
administrative
сказали,
limits,
украинским войскам, люди не хотят с вами жить. Они вышли на референдум, проголосовали
So
за
the people, the voters, came to the referendum and voted for everyone to withdraw troops from there and not to conduct any armed actions there. But they preferred to wage war. And now it all came to a head.
And it all comes to one thing.
вооруженным путем освободить
Either we do that
эти территории,
through
либо украинцы
military action will liberate the territories, or the Ukrainian troops will withdraw and leave these territories and stop killing people there.
Arm twisting methods that are being adopted, and I name it's America. How do you plan to circumvent all this? Will you pull back or push harder?
Okay, so that was what, and just a glimpse really of what the Russian president had to say on the Ukraine war. There's a far more detailed segment conversation about the war, what's happened in the last few years, and international pressure that's building on Russia. But Preeti, to you, on what really you're going to be looking forward to the most in that particular interview. If there's one issue that you want addressed in that interview or you're seeking answers to, which is that?
I want to get an understanding on what President Putin has to say about President Trump. I think that would be very interesting because I think that will make international headlines, especially in the current context where we stand. So I think that is very, very important, and I'd be watching onto that where internationally is concerned. And the second thing, I think, Gaurav would agree with me. I think the spotlight is the defense deals. The S-400 from Russia has proved to be a great, asset for us, especially in Operation Sindoor. Russia is the only country, if I'm not wrong, that actually shares cutting-edge tech, the current cutting-edge tech with India, which most other countries don't quite. And, I'd want to know, in terms of defense, what are we looking at, where we stand. So personally, from the Indian perspective, I would be looking at the defense deals and, what comes of that. And internationally, I'm dying to know what he has to say about President Trump.
And what about you, Gaurav? You've told me that what you're looking forward to is understanding the future of the India-Russia story, but beyond that, internationally, because like Preeti said, this is going to be grabbing headlines across the world. What is that one issue you're looking forward to hearing about from Putin?
Again, what's extremely significant is how do you move forward in trade ties? You have great defense ties. What kind of technology are you sharing when it comes to, let's say, the Su-57 fifth generation fighter jets? What kind of technology is being transferred to India? What kind of technology can we absorb? Point one. Point two, we're told nuclear submarines being leased is still work in progress. However, the S-500 system, now that would be an absolute game changer vis-a-vis not just Pakistan, and Pakistan would become too puny when you have that kind of missiles, offensive and defensive, because that's something that will also make China rework its entire strategy. That gives a lot of strength to India. The fact that he's also saying he's exposing American double standards is amazing. That, that's something that I'm very, we've been talking about it. America continues to buy from Russia, but does not want India to buy and is penalizing India. President Putin also thinks that's not fair. How do you take that conversation forward?
Actually, one more thing which I think, what I think will be critical for India, and I'd really be, looking at that very closely, is, the labor pact between Russia and India. Will President Putin address that? Because this is a time where you've had countries like America, which are closing in ranks in terms of visas where India is concerned. And Russia, hopefully, will be opening up because they need labor, they need even, semi-skilled, skilled, labor. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at Russia absorbing a lot of that strength that we have? That would be interesting. So two things which I'd be looking closely at. And
there's a lot of it which will also become clear tomorrow when you have that bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin and the signing of several MOUs. Preeti and Gaurav, of course, will be with me. We're going to continue tracking those updates. In just about 40 minutes from now, we'll get the first picture of Russian President Putin touching down in India, perhaps showing a namaste to all of us as he touches down in the national capital. We're going to continue our broadcast here and getting you live updates from Moscow as well. Preeti and Gaurav have been to Moscow, which is why producers have been kind enough to send me. And this is the interesting aspect, Gaurav, is that, when this interview was planned, lined up, we were planning this for months together. It was a slotted 60-minute interview. From that to becoming a 100-minute long interview speaks volumes of how Vladimir Putin has chosen to take every question, said, take your time, ask me anything you want, completely unscripted, free-flowing conversation that's gone out to 100 minutes.
So the West has tried to villainize Vladimir Putin. India today will show you a different side of Vladimir Putin, all facts, all questions asked. But then there is a Russian perspective, and in this Western agenda-driven news, you get facts in public domain. There may be some who'll try and say that the news has to be done from this perspective. As far as India Today is concerned, we give you news the way it is. Free-flowing and facts first to keep India first.
Very true. And the message of India first for Putin, Russia first, it ultimately translates to the same thing, because you see both countries have such a great relationship. That's what Putin also constantly refers to in that interview. But enough from us. I want to bring in, I know we've transported ourselves via this set to Moscow because we're here in the national capital. Let me bring in Geeta Mohan. She's joining us from Moscow. She's had that conversation with the Russian president. So who better than Geeta to tell you about what to expect in this interview? Geeta, first of all, a huge congratulations on being a part of such a historic agenda-setting interview, one that's grabbing international headlines right now. But I want to understand from you, and I think this is a question most people have, and I'm sure you've got it a lot. What was it like? What was the experience like of interviewing the president of Russia, Geeta?
Well, it's one of the rarest moments in a journalist's career when you get to interview a world leader. And Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, is one such instance, an experience which is going to be unforgettable. The crew, our entire leadership, everyone was here. But going into the Kremlin, walking into those corridors and going into the Ekaterina Hall, which is the Catherine Hall, historic, that's where all the important meetings, the decorations, all those occasions are celebrated in that very room. So it was amazing, just one, to be there. Secondly, waiting for President Putin then to come for the interview, and then interviewing the man himself. And I say this because it was a no-holds-barred interview. We asked him any and every question that we wanted to. We had our own counter questions to every response of his. And he very freely spoke about everything, whether it is bilateral, India-Russia relations, India and the region, Russia and the region, and Russia and the world. So we did not confine ourselves just to one subject, that is his very, very important visit to India, which comes after 5 years, but also more importantly, the fact that where is Russia today? It's a changed world order in many ways than one. Russia certainly is in the middle of a very intense war, not just with Ukraine, but also with how Europe, the West, and America is looking at this entire region. So in all of that, what we are looking at and what we understand is that this is a very confident Putin. Despite all the gains or losses, a very confident Putin who thinks that he has sent out a very strong message. And at this point in time, with the change in administration in US, the fact that they're engaging the administration over here in itself speaks volumes. That's exactly why it was a historic moment, because the day before, when we were at the Kremlin, in that very same hall, in the rooms, just a few rooms away, there was a historic moment unfolding right in front of us. That is the meeting of Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff with President Putin. And in that meeting, there was a lot of forward movement on how America is looking at an engaged, negotiated settlement between Russia and Ukraine. We'll break that down for you because that's a very important breaking news. But it was, in all, an amazing experience. Anjana and I were prepared, but also the fact that it went very, very smoothly when it comes to interviewing a leader, and he was absolutely okay with taking any question. The interview had to last only about an hour, but it went on for more than 90 minutes. That speaks of how comfortable the entire atmosphere for an interview, an intense interview at that, was.
No, you're right. It was intense, because I was watching it and thinking that, look, this particular issue, for example, there were some of those topics that were brought up that I was wondering how Putin would address, but he took them all head on. But Gaurav, to you, you've tracked the India-Russia story for so many decades now. What is the one aspect that you're looking forward to hear about from Mr. Putin?
How is this relationship being taken forward? How does this move beyond just being defense and strategic relationship? How does this go into the economic aspect? Because economy drives any relationship to the next level. Russia-India relationship, it stood the test of time, whether it's before the 1971 war, the agreement between the two countries, the 1999 war in Kargil, and how Russia was quick to rush military hardware to India, and subsequently the nuclear submarine that we have, the kind of technology and knowledge that India gained from Russia. So over the years, military cooperation is very strong. How do you move beyond that military cooperation, beyond energy, to trade, for example, people-to-people ties? How do you take that forward? Once that happens, this relationship will only rise and soar after that.
No, very true, Ed. I can promise you, Gaurav, that when you tune in, and so do our viewers at 9 p.m., he actually has answers to that, about what the future of India-Russia ties look like. There's such a deep sense of trust that you also get when you listen to Mr. Putin speak about India, or speak about Prime Minister Modi, for that matter.
That's very interesting that you mentioned his camaraderie, his camaraderie with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Yeah. So President Putin has been at the helm of affairs for about 25 years. If you remember that picture that you and I were talking about in 2001, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. That's the time.
That, yeah.
And we have that picture.
That also, yeah.
That's the time, Narendra Modi wasn't even Chief Minister of Gujarat till then. He became Chief Minister of Gujarat in end 2001, early 2002. And that's when something started changing. But from that to now, that Narendra Modi has been Prime Minister of India for 11 years, they've met perhaps 19 times plus. It just goes on to show how close the bond between the two of them are. I was there in Tianjin. We were reporting from Tianjin, and that's when President Putin waited for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They traveled in the same car. There's a conversation around that, and that also shows how close the two are to each other. The Russia first and India first, how they partner together, is something which is very important, Akshata.
Those are the pictures right there that Gaurav was referring to, the 2001 pictures. You have Putin, you have Vajpayee, and you have Narendra Modi right behind. I will also, of course, show you exactly that moment where you can see Narendra Modi right behind them. So you essentially have seen Putin ensure that, the Russia-India story. Hello and welcome. Good evening. You're tuned into India Today's non-stop coverage as Vladimir Putin is set to touch down in India in less than 30 minutes from now. We've also got the man himself speaking to us here on India Today. This is a world exclusive you don't want to miss out on. We've been giving you glimpses of what to expect from that exclusive conversation. But you'll hear from the Russian president on a slew of issues, on his friendship story with Prime Minister Modi, anecdotes like the time when he traveled with Prime Minister Modi in a car. But let's get you the big breaking news that's coming in right now. Putin will be landing in India in less than 30 minutes. Here's what sources are telling us: that Prime Minister Modi may be receiving Putin personally at the Palam airport in Delhi. And remember the time when Prime Minister Modi and President Putin traveled in one car together, which became a huge, huge headline moment across the world? Expect a repeat of that. Sources are telling us that once President Putin touches down in Delhi, Prime Minister Modi and he will travel in the same car all the way to 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, to the Prime Minister's residence, where there is going to be a dinner meeting as well. But it's that bonhomie, that messaging, that friendship that really makes this story of the Putin-Modi friendship stand out. The fact that they always ensure that every single minute they spend together talking about how to better that friendship story between India and Russia. Those pictures that you see on your screens were from Tianjin, which made headlines globally. It had everyone talking, particularly America. And you remember then that US President Donald Trump became rather jittery seeing these images of friendship, of bonhomie, because it was the exact opposite of what he wanted. Now you're going to see that exact moment being replicated again, this time in Delhi. Gaurav Sawant is with us. Gaurav, you were there in Tianjin when this happened. So you remember the frenzy that it created, the absolute frenzy, because it was a completely unplanned moment. Now again, we're hearing from our sources, Prime Minister Modi, after receiving President Putin at the airport, could also take him in his car to his residence.
This just shows how close the relationship is, and you're absolutely right. When this was happening in Tianjin, we just couldn't understand what was happening, because the Russian president waited a long time for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to arrive. They traveled in the same car. That car remained there for quite some time. So initially they kept talking in the car, and then ultimately the car moved. It was much later we were told that the two traveled together. They wanted to have their private conversation. And what better place than a car? It's only the two of them and their interpreters. If that's happening once again, this just goes on to show that this is a signal being sent out to the world. Remember, there were many in the West who wanted India to kind of reduce our dependence on Russia, not to be so close to Russia. Some said that India should be criticizing Russia. Now the same West is actually telling India, can you please tell Russia? Look at the change in tone. India hasn't changed. Russia hasn't changed. It's the tone, the talking down tone of the West that is now changing. And this just goes on to indicate how when two leaders are working for the betterment of their countries, their respective countries, everyone ultimately starts aligning themselves with the larger goal. And especially when, as the Russian president in that interview, and I don't want to give out those details because I want our viewers to look at that interview, hear it from themselves, for themselves, what the Russian president intends to say, especially about the Ukraine conflict, America, and of course his relationship with Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
What we're going to do is, considering there's so much anticipation and build-up and excitement over that particular picture of Prime Minister Modi and President Putin when they will be exiting from the Palam airport and they will be together in the same car. There's a lot of excitement over that. That was one of the questions we actually asked President Putin about that moment that happened in Tianjin. So I'll play that out for our viewers in just a moment. Let me just bring in our reporters for a quick update. Amit Bharadwaj is joining us live from the Palam airport in Delhi. We've got Pranay Upadhyay of India Today Global standing by from 7 Lok Kalyan Marg from the Prime Minister's residence. Amit, to you first for a quick update. Less than 30 minutes to go. The scheduled time is 6:30 when we will see Putin touching down in the national capital. I'm sure security is at an all-time high in the stretch that you're in.
Absolutely right, Akshata. In fact, entire media crew which was standing around the Palam Technical Airport has been now moved a bit away from the airport. I'll try to get you a view from here as well, from where we would see the two leaders, coming out of the airport, Palam Technical Airport here in the national capital. Prime Minister Modi is in most likelihood expected to be here.
Quickly, an update that's coming in. Just stay with me. We understand that now Putin's fleet has entered Indian airspace. So that means that the touchdown could happen anytime soon. 6:30 is what we're hearing. So that update that's just come in right now, that the plane in which Putin is traveling, it's entered into Indian airspace. Go ahead, Amit.
Yes, Akshata, in fact, what we are given to understand is that Russian fleet, or rather President Putin's fleet is already in the Indian airspace, which also means that this wait will be over shortly, maybe next 25 to 30 minutes, and there will be a touchdown of the craft and the fleet at Palam Technical Airport here in the national capital. And around that time, we would also see Prime Minister Modi reaching the airport personally, in all likelihood receiving the Russian President, President Putin out here. And then, as Gaurav was also mentioning, anything of that sort cannot be ruled out because we had seen what happened during the SCO Summit. And, that's the kind of Bonhomian friendship, also messaging that needs to be sent out.
Both leaders are about those candid moments, are about those important optics, knowing full well that that speaks volumes really for all the countries, maybe the West particularly, watching out. Pranay Upadhyay of India Today Global joining us live from outside the Prime Minister's residence. Pranay, right after touching down, we're hearing that Prime Minister Modi and President Putin will travel in the same car. Think September 2025, think Tianjin. They'll travel in the same car from the Palam airport to the Prime Minister's residence for dinner. What's on the menu for the dinner? What's also on the table? What's on the menu when they meet together today and travel in that car?
Akshita, this is going to be a significant departure from the protocol if both leaders travel in India in the same car, because there are indications we have been given to understand by our sources that both the leaders can travel again after 3 months in same vehicle, in the same car, and that could be Indian Prime Minister's vehicle, Indian Prime Minister's car. And if that happens, that is going to be another big departure and a big thing. And that is also, as Gaurav was mentioning, that is the expression of confidence in India's security, in Indian Prime Minister. And if both leaders will be coming to 7 LKM, the Lok Kalyan Marg, and there are special arrangements. The Prime Minister House is specially lit up for this event. There is a heavy security deployment. Behind us is also a heavy security deployment here by the Delhi police and other paramilitary forces. So not only the security deployment is there, the special arrangements are also being made in Prime Minister's office and in his residence to welcome President Vladimir Putin. That is going to be a private dinner hosted by Prime Minister Modi, but definitely a big departure from the protocol that Prime Minister not only would be receiving President Vladimir Putin at the airport, but both the leaders are likely to travel in the same vehicle if that happens.
So that's a photo op to watch out for. But let's talk about what happened in September 2025 and hear from Vladimir Putin himself about what really triggered that particular moment, what led to President Putin and Prime Minister Modi traveling in the same car in Tianjin, what was discussed between the two leaders. We asked him in that exclusive conversation. Here's a glimpse.
Very interesting question, because when you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a car, and we're showing it to our viewers right now. You were traveling in a car with him. Was it pre-planned, or how did it go about? How did it happen? And what did you discuss in the car?
Вы знаете, обсуждали текущие вопросы.
We were talking about just the current agenda. It was not pre-planned. We just went outside into the street, and my car was there, and I suggested that we should get together, just, as a sign of friendship, of comradeship. There's nothing, no complicated orchestration, just as friends. We got together in one car and we spoke. Along the road, there was always something to talk about. And, we had a conversation. We even sat in the car for quite some time. And then I said, yes, we should go because they're waiting for us. But there's nothing special about that. It just testifies to the fact that there's a lot we have to talk about. And these topics are of importance to us.
Right. President Sir, the fact that you're going to go to India, you just said that both leaders are going to cement the guarantees that you give each other. What are the kind of announcements that we can expect? We've heard about technology transfer. We've heard about trade enhancement. What are the solid announcements during this visit? And I ask you this is because the world, and you know who I mean, would be watching.
Ну, то, что мир будет следить за
Well, the
нашим
world
здесь.
is going to be watching. I don't think there's anything special about that. Because, India is a great country, 1.5 billion people. It's a developing economy where the rate of growth is 7.7%. This is the first result in the world. Prime Minister Modi has managed to achieve that, and this says a lot. The Indian nation can take pride in. There's all to be proud of. Of course, there are always detractors, critics who believe that this can be done better, but that said, the result is evident. We've got a whole plan for cooperation which covers the most important spheres and fields. The most important ones are certainly oriented towards the future, and one of them is high technology. India and Russia are working together in outer space exploration, in energy, nuclear energy in particular, which is well known because, one of the leaders in that field, also shipbuilding, aircraft building. We have very many interesting directions which are oriented towards the future. Or let's take artificial intelligence. We'll probably talk about that later. But this is one of the key technologies of the future which is reshaping the world as we speak, because it manages to multiply things many-fold, but at the same time it creates certain challenges to be addressed. And we'll talk about all of that. And as Prime Minister Modi thinks and what I think, well, we'll choose what is of the greatest significance at this stage, and we'll help with that.
Agreement, sir?
Well, of course, but we should probably not announce them right now because, you know, all of that is going to be announced in the course of the visit. We will present that to the public. And then the colleagues will present all of these agreements to us, and we'll have to give our final approval to these agreements.
That's the Russian president there speaking about the time when he invited Prime Minister Modi to travel with him in the same car, the messaging that was involved in it as well. As we continue to track all the latest updates and count down, importantly, to Vladimir Putin's touchdown in the national capital in just about 15 minutes from now. Let me once again reintroduce all of our reporters. We have Shivani Sharma, Amit Bharadwaj, Pranay Upadhyay. Here in the studio with me is Gaurav Sawant, and also joining us is Sandeep Unitan. Sandeep, what do you make of the kind of messaging involved here? Both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin know the importance of sending across a message of this friendship, of the warmth and the relationship that they share, and know exactly who's watching.
Absolutely, Akshada. And, you know, it seems to be a replay of what they did at Tianjin, that armored limousine. We don't know yet which car they're going to travel in. Is it going to be President Putin's Urus limousine? It is the Russian equivalent of the US President's Beast. That's also going to be here in Delhi, we are told. We don't know if it's going to be that car that they'll travel in, or is it going to be Prime Minister Modi's armored vehicle. But the fact is that the Urus is believed to be here in Delhi, and it is one-of-a-kind vehicle that the Russians have produced in the last 5 or 6 years. It's an armored vehicle. It's almost 7 tons, and that is something, you know, and it can basically withstand any kind of attack from, you know, rocket-propelled grenades, machine guns, armor-piercing rounds, and even it's believed to be anti-tank resistant. So that is one vehicle that we're going to be seeing in Delhi in the next couple of days. So it is very interesting, the fact that the Prime Minister is choosing to ride with President Putin shows the warmth of this relationship, really. It's unlike any other relationship. It's unlike any other state visit even. And I would go so far as to say that this is the most consequential visit possibly in India in the 21st century. Given the times that we are in right now, Russia is in the middle of a war. India is facing unprecedented diplomatic pressure, tariffs from the United States, and is being forced to choose, take a side. And India is choosing to do what is in India's supreme national interest. So that is really what we're going to be seeing over here, an independent Indian foreign policy, India choosing to take the path that suits its national interests more. Akshita.
Very true. And the messaging here is very important. You know, it's a short visit by President Putin to India, but one that's loaded with messaging, loaded with symbolism. And there's a lot of mention of that, by the way, in the interview that we will be airing at 9 p.m. tonight. Yes, we're counting down to Putin touching down in the national capital, but we're also counting down to the biggest interview of 2025, that big world exclusive where we've spoken to Vladimir Putin, and this by far is the longest interview he's ever done, 100-minute long interview where he sat down, took every single issue, every global issue that he's addressed. That's coming up at 9 p.m. tonight. So you'll hear from the man himself about why his visit is so crucial to India. Gaurav, you know, we've also got our panelists with us on this broadcast. We've got Lieutenant General Tiny Dhillon. General Dhillon, I'd like to begin with you on this broadcast as well. Of what to you, sir, makes this visit so crucial for both India and Russia, I'd say?
Good evening, ma'am, and good evening to Gaurav and the fellow panelists and your viewers. India, Russia, and before that, India, Soviet Union. We go back a long way in history, in our relationship, in our cultural exchanges, And more important than anything else in this diplomatic world, the mutual faith we have, the mutual trust we have with each other. You know, रशिया का नाम आने से दिल में लगता है कि किसी अच्छे आदमी की बात कर रहे हैं. He will stand by us, he will not let us down. Whereas, as we all know, in today's international diplomacy, believing someone is very difficult. Today's friend can be tomorrow's enemy, whereas Russia has always proved to be a friend and friend on whom you can rely. 1971 war, Goa liberation, or even after that. And practically after independence, all three defense forces, if we are so strong today, the basis of the strength of our armed forces was basically because Soviet Union provided us all the wherewithal in terms of equipment and what have you. So we have a great relationship, not only in defense, also in cultural relationship. I remember when I was in Russia, I've been there 2-3 times. Once in Red Square, I was walking, and since I wear a turban, I can be identified from far away. An old Russian man walked up to me and he said, "Mr. Singh, India?" I said, "Yes." And he started humming. मेरा जूता है जापानी, मेरी पतलून इंग्लिशस्तानी, सर पे लाल टोपी रूसी, फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी. They are so fond of our music, they're so fond of our soft power. And I think it's a great relationship. And Mr. President Putin's visit to India is coming at a very crucial time when there's a lot of churning going around in international relations. And it couldn't have come at any time other than this. I think it's a golden opportunity to reap the best output from this visit. And I'm actually looking forward to it. And as the program goes by, we'll discuss more about it.
And I hope you're also looking forward to our exclusive, General Dillon.
Yes,
that's at 9 p.m.
Absolutely.
Where we're going to be hearing from Putin on exactly what you spoke of the warmth that India and Russia share. Gaurav, we constantly hear this term, when you describe the India-Russia story, all-weather friend, all-weather dost. Define that for us, Gaurav. You've been to Russia, and like General Dillon says, there's a very deep connect, people-to-people connect that you get to see on ground.
So, before the 1971 war, India and Russia and then Soviet Union actually signed a pact, which was a mutual defense pact. And that meant an attack on India would have meant an attack on Soviet Union and that they would defend us. So when the Americans were trying to put pressure on India and they sent in their fleet in the Indian Ocean, the Russians sent in their fleet. To ensure that the Chinese don't trouble us, they had 2 divisions on the Sino-Soviet border. And that ensured that India was able to ensure the birth of Bangladesh and the liberation of Bangladesh and, that operation. Subsequently, let me talk about the Kargil war. India wanted T-90 tanks. Russia took T-90 tanks out of its armor and gave it to India. A nuclear submarine. No other country in the world is willing to lease a nuclear submarine. Russia has done that for India. Our own nuclear submarine, the kind of technology they've shared with us. Fighter pilot Su-30 MKI, Russian aircraft now made in India, MiG-21, MiG-27, the entire MiG series and Su series of aircraft, our aircraft carrier, our submarines. So there's so much of defense cooperation between India and Russia. Now that's one part of the story. The kind of technology they're willing to give you, the kind of access they're willing to give you, and the kind of, emotionally, their people want to come and spend time with you, learn about our culture, learn about our way of life, and the close partnership between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Putin personally. That's also taking this relationship to a new level, to a higher level, that level of trust that the two enjoy. So people to people, government to government, now we need to see whether business to business, it expands.
Very true. Before I bring in Dr. Datta, since there's so much curiosity of exactly what the Russian president has told us in this world exclusive, and I'm not exaggerating when I say the entire world is waiting for that particular interview. Gaurav did touch upon, the friendship that's lasted for decades, really, between India and Russia. What does President Putin have to say about, really, this friendship story? How does he see it going forward? What's the next step, really, in this relationship? Listen in to one particular excerpt.
Dear viewers, hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Aaj Tak India Today and I'm Anjana Om Kashyap and we're at Kremlin today and you're about to witness history, a very historic moment. It is said that when two old friends meet, they have their private jokes. They have a lot of banter, they have a lot of fun, and they have a bonhomie or camaraderie. But the others in the room might feel a little uncomfortable. And why do I say this? I say this because as the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi, the world will be watching very, very closely. Vladimir Putin is undoubtedly one of the most influential politicians of the world whose decisions don't just affect Russia, but numerous nations across the world. He's a very compelling and enigmatic figure on the world stage. It just doesn't get more exciting than this.
Well, that's right, Anjana. Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan. We have with us a man who is known to be one of the world's longest-serving leaders. He's seen it all, through wars and economic recessions, from disintegration of countries to a changed world order, from Boris Yeltsin to Donald Trump, from Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Manmohan Singh to Narendra Modi. He's seen the world change right in front of him, and he's taken Russia through very turbulent times and yet has cemented his position as a force to reckon with. Thank you so much, President, for doing this with us. You're in conversation with India Today and Aaj Tak. That's the President of the Russian Federation for you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our network. How are you doing?
Надеюсь, что и вам у нас в России.
Well, I do hope that you find it great in Russia, in Moscow. You like Moscow and the Kremlin, where we're working.
Плану.
Well, as you can see, everything is according to plan. On the whole, we're happy with the economic situation. And what's most important, this month, I'm very happy that I'm going to meet, as you have just pointed out, my friend, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We agreed to meet in India a long time ago. There's a lot to talk about because the range of our cooperation with India is very huge. I'm not even talking about history of our relations because this history is of a unique nature. And I would also like to point out that the path that India has traveled since gaining its independence, just over the 77 years, which is a very short span in the scale of history, and India has managed to travel a great way. And I'm going to dwell on that a little bit later. But, you know, when we live our daily lives, we hardly notice the changes that are currently afoot. It rarely happens when we notice these changes. But if we have a look back at the history, we'll see that what transpired in India is, to a large extent, a miracle. Well, I don't think there are many people living in India who know that the longevity, the life expectancy of India over the 77 years has...
We will talk about longevity in some time from now.
Хорошо, поговорим обязательно. Но
we're certainly going to talk about that. But be that as it may, our relations with India are developing across different ranges, different avenues. I'm very happy to have this chance to meet Prime Minister Modi. And not just business ties, but also personal ties.
Okay, we're just about 5 minutes away from President Putin touching down in Delhi. We understand that his plane has already entered Indian airspace. There's quite a bit of movement happening at the Palam airport, and I'll get you those updates with our